Okay.
Shooter, are you ready? Stand by.
3, 2, 5.
Hey shooters, Gunner South here. To do a quick video on something I get a lot of questions on, thought I would cover it real quick. One of my other videos I have is how to set up your gun, your Glock 19 Gen 4 for the SSP Division and IDPA. So I wanted to talk briefly today about how to set up your Glock 34 for the SSP Division for IDPA. So one of the things, tell you a little bit about this gun. This is the gun that I made master with in IDPA. I shot this probably 7, 10, 15,000 rounds, somewhere in that range. Honestly, I don't even know. I don't keep track of it. I shot it for approximately a year and a half. I'm probably averaging between 7 and 10,000 rounds a year, plus some practice rounds. I don't really know. The only thing I'm trying to say here is that I've got a lot of rounds on this gun, and I kind of know how it feels and how it operates in competition. Just throwing out some of my creds, all right? There's not a lot of credentials out there, but I do have a lot of time on this gun. And a lot of guys have a lot of time on Glock 34s. So, I'm going to dive right in. What do you need to do to your Glock 34 Gen 4 to keep it SSP legal in IDPA and to upgrade it for competition? Well, first things right there, sights. So one of probably the most important things you're going to want to do for your Glock 34 in any generation, in Glock 4 generation, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, what did I do? Well, I do Dawson Precision front sights. I think they're longer. I think they capture more light. That the fiber optic is more exposed and therefore glows up really good. This is not a well-lit room down here, despite me filming. I really don't have a professional lighting setup, so it still glows pretty good there. I've tried other brands of fiber optic sights. They're just not the same, dude. And I don't break fiber optic sights shooting these. So I go with the fiber optic front. Specifically, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about this later, but I go with the .235 height front sight for Glock 34s, okay? And then the rear is an old style Zev. Why do I like this? I like it because it's got the serrations on the rear. A lot of the blacked out rears, I've seen some sold that are just flat black. I like the serrations. I think it keeps some of the glare down. Not that glare has ever really been a problem for me, but I do like the Zevs. I like the fact that they're hooked, so you can hook them on something. Not that we do that in IDPA, but that's one of probably the most important things you're going to want to do to your SSP gun, whatever you do, whatever you shoot. And I can heartily recommend Dawson. I put Dawson on everything pretty much. And then I like for Glocks the Zev. They have a new generation rear sight, so I'm less opinionated on that now because I don't have it. This is the old style. I don't do a U-notch. However, I do kind of a wider rear notch and a skinnier front post because I think it's pretty simple to line up your front sight in the middle. And frankly, I would rather be able to pick up the sight. Like if it comes up in there, I want to be able to see it so I can put it in the middle. So if it comes down here and I can just barely see it, I can put it in the middle. I think if you have a skinnier notch, you're more likely to be like, where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Whereas this thing is popping up. Even at that, I can then pop it up right into where I can start shooting again. So that's why I go with a wider rear notch, something to keep in mind. So some people go skinny. I go wide rear notch, skinny front sight. You'll need 3 magazines, all right? They come with 3 magazines, no big deal. Here are some tips, though. if you're going to shoot a Glock 34 in competition, IDPA competition, you probably need to mark your mags. There's going to be a lot of guys that shoot Glock, a lot of people that shoot 9mm Glock. Go ahead and get a Sharpie. Just the metallic Sharpies is what I have. Put your initials on them. It's going to save you some headache. And then finally, another tip here. This is what I do. My starting mag, whatever it is, whichever one gets loaded to 11, gets a paster. That way I know that's the mag that starts the stage. This is the mag that has 11 in it. So this is the mag that ends up getting the most use on it, and is the first mag that you can start using to, you know, if you're going to rebuild your mags after however many 1,000 rounds, this is the first mag to rebuild. So I like doing that. I like keeping this in a spot where I know that's my starting mag. It's got the paster on the bottom, and then I've marked my mag so they don't go walking off the range with someone home. They don't go home with someone else. Now I'll tell you, it's not because I think that the shooting community has thieves or anything. It's just everyone shoots a Glock, or it's at least a very popular gun, and you know they're going to pick up a Glock mag and they might not know whose it belongs to. So that just helps speed things up. Put your initials on them. Let's talk about holsters. This is a CompTac International, I believe. Fits the 34-35. I've discussed this in my intro to IDPA before. Basically, this got good retention. That's not coming out. It's not just going to fall out. It's a retention adjustable. And it's cut for the chamber so that as you start drawing, you can start applying forward pressure to the gun and it will come out, right? Basically, it's going to let the gun out of the holster sooner because it's cut lower, all while remaining IDPA legal. And then additionally, I've said this in my other video, I think you should have a belt holster. I think it does. Paddle holsters I don't like. I understand the convenience of them, but I think you should really have a belt holster, and you should put it in the same place every day, every time you use it, because that will build your muscle memory up. So this is an acceptable holster. I like it. I used it. This is the one I used to make MA, right? No big deal in terms of like, I mean, but there's nothing special about this other than it's a really good quality holster, and you can buy the holster and then forget about it. Now, finally, the last part you cannot see on this gun is springs. Most people, when they have a competition gun, will swap the springs on a Glock. That's how you do a trigger job, because you cannot change the trigger shoe, right? No flat triggers in SSP. No aftermarket triggers in SSP. Must be the OEM trigger, okay? No visible external modifications, SSP. So I swapped the springs. I went with Zev. I've used them in multiple guns. This is not an advertisement for Zev. I actually have some problems with Zev and their guns. I mean their triggers in guns, like their aftermarket one. I think they could potentially be unsafe. But I will tell you, their spring kit is generally fine. Make sure after you install it, you check the trigger return spring strength. Because what will happen is if you buy a brand new spring kit and you break it out there, the trigger return spring is actually a higher powered trigger return spring in their kit, because the idea is to increase the tension to allow this trigger to swing out. So if it's a stronger spring holding it in, then the trigger is weaker coming out. But the one issue you want to check for is that if you creep that gun out, creep this trigger out after firing it, that you will actually reset the safety, right? You want to make sure that that trigger return spring isn't so strong that the safety tab doesn't pop out. You see how it was a little sluggish right there? If you can do it slow enough, you want to make sure that safety tab pops out on its own. This is probably just it's a little dirty and needs to be cleaned, but that's something to check for after you install a spring kit, any spring kit. I go with the Zev Competition Spring Kit, and then I go with the V4 connector, right? V4 connector. So what that ultimately looks like is you're swapping out the connector here, and I think it's called their V4 Race Connector. I like how that connector feels in terms of the trigger. You might not. Some people say it's spongy. I've not had any problems with it. I actually just got used to it. I got used to it, but how it feels is it just kind of rolls through. That puts the, comes out, rolls through. And that gives you kind of a, I mean, I don't think striker triggers can be particularly improved. At least Glock triggers are going to be kind of, they're going to be Glock triggers. I don't, in the interest of chasing a really great trigger, people do a lot of stupid stuff to Glocks. I think you should just get used to the Glock trigger if you want to shoot Glock and improve it by maybe taking some of the weight down. That's my 2 cents. So, kind of rolls through, kind of breaks towards the back. You know, no problem there. Kind of feels like a double action. Let's talk about some of the stuff you can do that you should not do. Okay. Let's talk about backstraps. Backstraps is something you can do that maybe you should not do. I think, personally, that unless you have large, I have about medium-sized hands, maybe slightly on the smaller side of medium. I like how high the grip I can get on a Glock is when I do not have the beaver tail extension on here. I think even the medium backstrap, which I think is the smallest you can add with the beaver tail, still will take your hand that much further off the bore axis, right? It's still going to add some material here. Even if it's really thin, it's still adding some material off this tang as it was. It's going to keep your hand just that much further down and away from the bore axis. So I think if you, unless you have a really bad issue with slide bite, and I will occasionally get slide bite, and I consider it worth it. I consider it worth it. Unless you just have a terrible time with it, I would say run no beaver tails. The other thing I like about it is it makes the grip, which everyone complains about how blocky Glocks are. I think it makes the grip slightly smaller for someone like me with medium-sized hands. Gen 3s are too big, but Gen 4s with no backstrap feel really good. I have a lot of access to the trigger, and it allows me to get a really good trigger press. So don't just mindlessly throw the beaver tails on there just because it's a Gen 4, and that's something you can do. Consider your options. Consider the fact that this is the smallest grip, and if you have smallish hands or medium hands or whatever, really take the time and evaluate whether you want to just throw the beaver tail on there. Okay, I opted to not. And then finally, extended slide stops, extended slide releases. A lot of people, well, the 34 might come with an extended one on there, or there are aftermarket ones available. First off, SSP aftermarket ones are not legal necessarily. There might be some that are legal, but aftermarket ones are generally not legal. And then I will tell you, I've seen a lot of people shoot, and I've seen a lot of people shoot with Glocks, and probably the #1 malfunction I see with this is some sort of early lock back or not locking back. Those cost you time in competition, especially the not locking back on the last round, right? They'll shoot, bang, 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 and they're like, and nothing happens. Then they perform the reload. Then after they perform the reload, they have to then charge the weapon, and then they can start shooting again. All because they put an extended slide release on here, and their grip kept it down and kept it from doing its job. So leave it alone. Really, 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 really think about whether or not you need this, because the factory one works just fine. It's available to me with medium, small hands, what do you want to say, medium hands. I mean, I can get to it all day. I think what people do is they evaluate whether or not they can drop the slide from here with no round in it. But if you have a round in it, it's much easier to drop the slide. So run with it stock. I think it's a bad idea unless you have small hands and you're hitting right here, right? So people, oh, I put a beaver tail on it, and then now I need the extended one. I was like, well, you're compounding your problems, right? I mean, I don't buy into the Glock perfection thing, right? But if you do choose to shoot this style of gun, you need to have some faith in the design before you start going and changing stuff, right? So shoot it a while, see what you think before you swap this out, because I see so many people that either reinstall these incorrectly, or they like, well, I got the extended one on there so I can hit it every time, and they hit it all the time and their slide never locks back. So all right, last topic for Gen 4 Glock 34 for SSP is ammunition. If you're going to be serious about competition, you're probably going to reload. And if you're going to reload, a lot of people suggest that you reload 147 grain bullets for the Glock 34. I would agree with that, with the caveat that you need to make sure, because 147s hit high at range, like 25 yards, they tend to I don't know. All I know is that if you shoot 147s out of a Glock 34, they're going to hit high at 25 yards. And that is why the height of the front sight that you want is .235. But sight in your gun with the ammunition you're going to use, and for a Glock 34 and SSP Division, I suggest 147s. And if you're going to shoot 147s, have the right height front sight for that. That's pretty much all there is to it. But that's it, guys. That's how I would set up a Glock 34 for the SSP Division in IDPA. It's pretty much all the modifications you're allowed to do. Don't do an undercut. Don't do stippling. Don't do beveling. Leave it as it is. Change the sights, change the springs, and shoot the damn thing. Shoot a lot. Thanks, guys.